We've talked a bit about how the Constitution was negotiated, the debates between the northern and southern states, debates between the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, big states and small states, and how we ended up with a bicameral legislature because of the Great Compromise, and how we ended up maintaining the slavery system due to the Three-Fifths Compromise. Let's take a look today a little bit at the structure of the Constitution. What does the document actually look like? What does it say? Well, it starts with the preamble. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare, do hereby ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America, to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. So there are several elements to this opening to the Constitution. It sets out the goals of the Constitution, which are, first and foremost, to create a more perfect union, making sure that the nation is safe. So we're talking there about national security, protecting the borders, protecting the citizens and the population, protecting individual liberty, which we know is one of the cornerstones of American democracy and a principle at the base of our nation. The general welfare, the idea that we're all in this together. The general welfare could be read as the economy, trying to make a prosperous nation, trying to make sure that in general most people are doing okay. You could read that a lot of different ways. So we the people, though, is what the Constitution starts with. The first three words of the Constitution in the preamble are we the people. And that's supposed to send a message that it is an enterprise, that this new nation is a product of everybody together and no one person or group has control or ownership of it. Then we go down into the first part of the Constitution after the preamble, and it's significant that we start with Article I, which sets up the legislative branch, sets up Congress. The legislative branch is the most closely associated branch of government to the people, because people elect representatives to the House of Representatives every 2 years, and elect members of the Senate every 6 years. But the House of Representatives is the most close connection that people have to the federal government in many regards. So, first thing that is set up is the legislative powers, what powers the Congress will have. We'll have a whole lesson on the powers of Congress. We'll go over that extensively. The first article of the Constitution also lays out how Congress is going to be elected. So how the senators and members of the House will be selected, how long they will serve, what the qualifications are for those positions, and all of those details. The second article is what sets up the office of the President and Vice President of the United States. It's the executive branch in Article 2. And that lays out the powers of the President, which include the power to command the armed forces, the power to set foreign policy, to negotiate treaties, and the power to appoint judges and select people who are going to serve in the judiciary as well as in the executive branch, as long as there is consent by the Senate. So the Senate gets to confirm judges, and that's an interesting point as we get into a discussion soon on the balance of power. How is power shared between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches? One example of that sharing of power is the selection of people who serve as judges on the Supreme Court and in other courts. They're picked by the President, but if the Senate doesn't approve of them, then they don't get the job. So the Supreme Court, very little is actually said in the Constitution about the Supreme Court other than it will be the highest court. And the Supreme Court mostly decides constitutional questions. So its role is to interpret what the meaning of the Constitution actually is, and to, in the case that Congress or the President has done something that violates the Constitution, the court is what we rely on to make sure the Constitution is upheld. The court has the power to strike down laws that are passed that are unconstitutional and set things right according to the will of the founders. So those are the three branches of government, legislative, executive, and the Supreme Court, set out in the first, second, and third articles of the Constitution, which come right after the preamble or the introduction to the Constitution itself.